This is a Balanced Brain podcast with your hosts, Melanie Nicholson and Sean Clift.
Hi, welcome to the Balanced Brain podcast. I'm Melanie Nicholson and my co-presenter is Sean Clift. And we have just recently started this podcast, and I've already done an episode with Sean where I was interviewed by him about my traumatic brain injury, my accident, and the tables have turned today, and now I'm interviewing Sean. So Sean, welcome to this episode.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's all good. Just to give a bit of background, we actually recorded a podcast 2 years ago. I think
Was it 2 years ago?
Yes, 2 years ago.
Wow.
And we were talking specifically about men's well-being at the time.
Yep.
And we were talking about I've been running workshops and looking at men's health issue with clients. And what came out in that podcast was your own personal story around some of the mental health challenges that you were having at the time.
Yep.
But that's not where the podcast was meant to go. And I think there was some, we're a little bit surprised about what came out of that. And that didn't ever go to air. I think at that time, it was something that I'm not sure that you were fully wanting to discuss on that podcast.
No, probably not.
Yeah.
In honesty. Yeah.
So that has changed. Obviously, we've decided to reinvigorate this new podcast series and with a different mindset around discussing that. So welcome, Sean.
Thank you.
And can you tell us a bit about what your experience has been with your mental health journey and probably compare it back to 2 years ago when we were kind of discussing it. It wasn't really something that came up then.
Yeah. Look, obviously this is a challenge for me because I never thought it had happened to me. Like most people who suffer from depression, I was the last person that me or anyone around me would have thought that I would have suffered from it. So it actually took a long time for me to, number one, even realise that I had a problem. Number two, to get any kind of help or talk about it. Number three, to admit it to anyone. And then to start to really work on it has been a long process. It's been a long journey. At this point in time, to be honest with you, I feel heaps better. Do I feel good? Sometimes more than not. Am I over it? Absolutely not. So it's an ongoing journey. But I just think that now I have a much better understanding of it. I'm not as ashamed of it. So I'm more willing to talk about it.
Yeah, great. So can you pinpoint a time over the last couple of years since we did that first podcast where what actually made you realise that, there's something not quite right, or were specific feelings or situations where that came up for you, where you finally had to recognise the elephant in the room, so to speak? Yeah,
well, look, I mean, what happened was a series of events, I guess. And, in my life, I've had lots of things that have happened over my life that have been bad, challenges. And there have been difficult times, and there's been periods of times where you're down about things. But in those times, I always sort of thought, I never thought that would last. I always thought, all I need to do is just get things on track, and once I get things on track, I'll be better. And to be honest with you, that's what happened. I've been through redundancies. I've been through a couple of redundancies in my life. And at the time it was a bit of a time where I was down for a little while, but then sort of looked at them as an opportunity to do something new and change and reskill and look at it as a really optimistic way of doing something different. I always liked trying out different things and doing different jobs.
I would describe you as an extrovert optimist, and that's how, when I first met you 10 years ago, that's really the energy that you gave to me. And it's interesting because we don't think of people generally with those personalities becoming depressed. So there's
Absolutely.
Actually, I think that is tougher when you identify as being the positive, outgoing, almost a party guy. I mean, you've been in bands and you've had a varied experience in the hospitality industry. So those things are where you tend to have to be on your game, extroverted. And
10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have totally agreed with you.
Yeah.
I was extroverted. I was confident. I was a glass half full kind of guy. I was always looking for the next challenge or the next project or the next opportunity or the next, next experience. And am I that kind of person now? On the outside, probably, to a lot of people, but I think most people that are close to me now have probably seen a lot more of an introverted side to myself, and I've seen a lot more of an introverted part of myself, and that's been a real journey, because I maybe that is what I am. I don't know,
and that's what
I'm trying to find out, I suppose.
Yeah. So if you think back to when you were growing up and through school, is that something that you had always identified with, being that outgoing, extroverted kid, or were there moments when you can reflect back when you were a kid where you actually were quieter, more introverted?
Yeah, look, when I was young, in primary school, I was quite introverted. And then I kind of came out of my shell when I was around sort of 15 or 16. And I wasn't sort of a party guy or anything like that, but, I really enjoyed the social aspect of school. I wasn't the best student, but I loved school, and I got involved in everything. I was not a great sportsman, but I loved playing sports. I wasn't at that point in time in my life, I wasn't a great musician, but I just wanted to play music. So I just joined the school band and joined the school musical, but didn't really have any talent at singing, so I joined the crew, you know what I mean? I just wanted to kind of be part of stuff and be part of it. And, to be honest, I went to quite a big school, big Catholic boys' school, and, it was, I ended up school captain, and I was probably one of the first sort of non-real academic school captains, and I think that I was voted in to that job because, I love hanging around with people, and I had a very wide circle of friends. I had friends that were rugby players, and I had friends who were musicians, and I had friends who were artists, and I had friends who were right into academia, and I just wanted to branch out and meet as many people as I could. School for me was a fantastic experience. I really enjoyed it. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it as a career-wise or anything like that. And I ended up studying hospitality because I didn't get into uni. That's what it came down to. And I thought, well, I'll just study this for a little while, upgrade my score so I can go and study business because my dad does business and that's what I'll do. But I ended up working in the hotel industry after it and just loved it. And that was a fantastic period of my life. I made some excellent friends. It was a really rewarding work, really hard work. It was a really fun environment. There was a lot of social interaction. I really enjoyed that. So over that whole period of time, sort of my 20s and 30s was a real highlight of life. And I had a real vigor for life. I had a real vigor for an enthusiasm to work up the corporate ladder and meet as many people as I could, and that connection with people has always been sort of the main driver for me, I guess. So up until that point, there'd be no way in the world I would have thought of depression, let alone thinking that I would get depression or that I would suffer it.
So there's nothing in your 20s and 30s that where you had moments of melancholy where you look back and that was actually a pattern, but it doesn't sound like it was. It was actually something that really has come about from...
Yeah, exactly. I had some challenges. Like I said, when I was, just left school, my parents divorced. That was a challenging time. I'm not saying that it was easy and that it wasn't sad for mourning of that relationship, but at the end of the day, I was pretty much ready to move home anyway and start my life. And my sister and I moved in together in Brisbane, and eventually, I reconciled with both my parents. It was hard not to take sides during that time, but I reconciled with them and saw that they were both really happy and really looked at it as a positive, actually. So I have a good relationship with my step parents, and good relationship with both of my parents, and so that was a hard time. But again, like, I'm not saying that I never thought that it would stay hard. I knew that eventually we'll be okay, we'll be fine. And then I sort of put all my effort into my career in the hotels, and the hotel I was working for sold and changed ownerships and changed branding, and I was made redundant, and I was a very, very hard worker. I put blood, sweat and tears into that role, and that was a hard time. That was a very difficult time, and that was probably the closest that I can remember where I felt a sense of depression.
And how long was that period for where you were redundant, like where you were without work?
Well, not too long. Like I looked at that as an opportunity for change. I mean, what I was doing in the hotels, I worked basically looked after the food and beverage department. I spent a long time working in the events part of the hotel, so weddings and conferences and corporate trade shows and things like that. So there was a lot of weekends, a lot of late nights. I think I worked 10 or 11 Christmas days in a row, 10 or 11 New Year's Eves in a row. It was a young man's game,
Well, just going into that, then you've had a massive change in the second half of your life after the age of 40 and going into your 40s, and you had a child.
Yeah, that was something that I'd always wanted to do. I always probably thought that I'd be a younger father, but so I'm 45 now and I'll have a 5-year-old in a couple of months. So fatherhood has been an incredible journey for me. When my daughter was born, or just before my daughter was born, was probably the lowest that I was at.
Right, okay.
That was a very, very difficult time, and I don't really want to talk about the specifics of it, but it didn't end well, and I basically lost that job, and I had nothing then. And when things went really, really bad, my wife and I, we're both older. So my wife and I sort of met when my wife was 40 and I was 38, and we both wanted to have children. And the doctor basically said to us, look, you guys can try naturally, but with Carmen's age, you're better off doing IVF.
Yep.
So we did that, and we were really lucky actually. We were successful on IVF's a convoluted thing. Like, it's not just you just try this and then this happens. There's a process that goes on, and then if that doesn't work, you do a couple of things. And my wife would be able to tell you much more about that than me. But at the end of the day, we were pretty lucky. We were given a low percentage, and we had a beautiful girl. But in the lead up to that period, I was unemployed. I was totally in the wilderness, totally in the dark. And there was a timeline ticking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you tell us what sort of fears came up around that time where you're unemployed, you're trying for a baby? What were the feelings that were coming up at that time that you may not have been familiar with in your 20s and 30s when you were basically working in a very successful, happy roles?
Well, in my 20s and 30s, if it had come to the period, in my late 20s and early 30s, if it had got to the period where I had a child on the way, it would have been a very exciting and joyous time, because I was in a good place. I was successful. I mean, what is perceived as successful? That's something really important that I'd like to touch on, because like, I perceived that was successful. Being in a management position or whatever. But at the period of time that my daughter was on her way, I was in a very, very dark place.
Yes. Yep.
And that came down to the sense that, what kind of father was I going to be? Because I wasn't able to provide, what was my wife going to do? You know, she was working, and it was getting to the stage where she was not going to work.
Yeah.
And I was desperate, and I was had lost all of my confidence, all of my joy. And there was a point where, in the months before Rosanna was born, that I had serious thoughts that she would be better off coming into the world without me.
And so that's obviously a really difficult time.
Yep.
And did you share that feeling or thought with anyone?
Not for a while. Not for a long time. My wife knew that I wasn't well. I don't think she really realised how unwell I was, right? And then I kind of told her what I was going through and what I was thinking, and yeah, that was probably the first time that I really sort of reached out to anyone, I think.
How did you seek assistance for that period of your life?
I didn't. I didn't for a long time. It got to the stage where I was very, very low. I couldn't really function normally at points. From the outside looking in, you probably would have thought that Sean's okay because, you just sort of throw up that barrier and throw on that mask and throw up that wall, and you try and be friendly and you try and be polite to everyone, you try and have a joke and you try and have a laugh, but honestly, it got to the stage where, I didn't think that I'd see my 40th birthday, that's for sure. I actually went on a camping trip on my own in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
I had no intention of coming back.
Right. So, and that was just before Rosanna was born?
Yep.
And other than your wife, were there other people around you that knew that's what was going on, or did you have that facade?
I had that facade, totally. And then I did start to go to counselling at that point in time, which was helpful to a point. And then I started to reach out. Well, my wife sort of reached out to my family and said, I don't know if you know, but, your sons and your brother is in a really bad way. And then so they sort of started to reach out to me. And I felt more confident talking to them at points, but I never really told them the truth, in all honesty. It was just, I didn't really tell them that. I just kind of kept saying, oh, look, I'll be okay once I get things on track. I just got to get things on track, and when I get things on track, I'll be okay. And then I started to reach out to some closer friends, and I'm really lucky. I've got really great friends.
Really good friends. Yeah, we talk about your friends a lot.
Yeah. I mean, you were one of them that I reached out to, really. And once I started to talk to friends, that was better, okay, because they were great listeners. Some friends are really great listeners, and they can sort of give you some good advice or just have a good chat to you. Other friends are really great at giving you a distraction, and that was really warranted at times too, to be honest. Like, I know that that's a big thing that say, males, they can't do anything and they just want to take you for a beer or whatever. But honestly, sometimes you just need that.
Yeah, of course. You need that balance between the...
Yeah. And that starting to reach out to friends was when that I knew that, that things weren't good. Right. Yeah.
And how did you come back from the camping trip, if that's where you got to in terms of your feelings? What do you feel like got you through that camping trip and made you come home?
Well, my little girl on the way, that's what did it. Like, at the end of the day, like, I just knew I had to. Like, I just thought that like to be selfish. Like, and I've got, I don't want to say that that's right because I don't think it's right, but I did feel like that at the time because I just felt like I had to, like, what sort of damage would that do before she's even here? So I just had to drag myself out somehow. Just drag myself out. It literally was dragging myself out of the tent and packing up the car and driving back to Brisbane, and just thought I just got to try. I got to try.
So then tell us, when your daughter came along, how did that change things? I know that can be a really challenging thing, particularly for men in that new role as father, and how that impacts on how you see yourself. And at the time, you're already going through the identity of, what am I doing in terms of employment and as a provider.
Yep.
So tell me about how that, once your daughter came along, what phase were you in then? How did that move through that period of your life?
Well, when Rosanna was born, when my daughter was born, it was absolute joy for me. So, my wife had a cesarean, so I don't know if people know what happens, but basically, they spend a little bit of time with their mum, but then mum's got to get, stitched up, and it's a pretty big operation. So actually, they give the father of the child. And then I knew that it didn't matter what else happened. That's now what I am.
Yes.
Right? That's what you are. That's the main thing that you are now is this. You're this girl's father. Like all the other things that you've been just don't matter. And I'm not saying that it was a light bulb moment or a switch on like that. But it was really like, okay, here we go. Like this is it. And so, I call her my little angel because in a way she was, And I know dads call their little kids little angels, but when I say that to her, I really do think that she's my little angel because she came along and really kind of gave me a new sense of focus, a new sense of purpose, a new sense of identity. And you know what? There was one day, I spent to be honest, I got another job, but I wasn't in a space to be able to work. I was so depressed and so completely scrambled that I found it hard to focus on anything. And at the end of the day, I just needed a circuit breaker somehow. And it was a very challenging time because my wife wanted to be the person to stay at home and raise our child, and I wanted to be the one who was out working and providing like the men should do, and blah 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 blah. That would have been an ideal world, but at the end of the day, my wife had a government job, stable government job. She could go back to work, and after the sort of first year of me sort of struggling with some casual work here and some part-time work here, and then getting a job and it closing and getting another one, I probably went through sort of 4 or 5 jobs in that 12-month period of the first year of Rosanna's life. And then eventually, it wasn't an easy thing to do, but eventually I stayed at home and was the primary carer for our daughter for between 2 and 3.
So tell us about this experience. Tell the listeners about what that experience was, being a carer of your daughter.
I can tell you that it's only privileged people could say this, right? But every father should try and have the chance to do that if they can, for their young ones' first couple of years. If you can spend a couple of months or 6 months or a year, I would highly recommend it, because you totally understand what parenting is, rather than being at work and coming home and trying to help out with things or doing things on the weekend. Like, it is tedious and it's boring and it's exciting, it's funny, it's fun, it's heartbreaking, it's everything. So there's one day where my little girl got really ill. You know, she had really bad diarrhea, and I think I had changed sort of 20 odd nappies in a couple of hours, and you know, the poor little thing, she was in a lot of pain, you know, and so after every change, I just put her in a bath and tried to get her soothed, and then eventually it just got so hard to keep putting new clothes on her. We just cuddled in bed, and I just held her in bed, and she just held on to me, and she just knew that I was going to be there. And I thought to myself, of all the things I've done over the years that I thought were a challenge or really important or vital, this meeting or whatever, there was absolutely nothing more important than that day. That's the most important day I've done. Like, it was just, yeah, she absolutely required 100% focus and attention. And if there was a mistake, or if I was lazy, or if I decided that there was another priority that needed to be focused on, she'd be in hospital or worse. So that was a very, very, very valuable lesson. And it's something that I'll never forget, to be honest.
And what were some of the challenges, or did you have some things come up around how you were being perceived as being a stay-at-home dad? Or I think I remember you telling me about how you would go down to the kindy and there'd be other mums there and there'd be some...
Oh, yeah, not the kindy. It'd be like at the local...
The park.
Yeah, local park or the local coffee shop. You'd sort of go down there and there'd be, you know, heaps of mums with, you know, toddlers, and they'd all talk and share stories about, you know, feeding or, you know, clothes or where they're going to go to kindy or whatever. And basically I'd go down there. Rosanna would play with the other kids, but I'd sit by myself. So there was a couple of times where a couple of the others mothers reached out, but very rarely. And I remember the first time I took Rosanna to swimming lessons, this swimming teacher sort of said to me, oh, you know, it's okay, you know, little one, you know. And she said, oh, well, you know, usually, there's not too many people come here with their dads, you know. Like, it's a different world now, isn't it? You know. And there was that kind of perception
you always hear about these, that dads get more attention if they take their kids to the park or the pool. It's like, aren't they being a great dad? But your experience was the opposite of being actually
I don't think that people would have thought that, you're not a good dad or whatever. It's just that, it was hard to be included, I guess.
Included.
Yeah.
I guess that's probably what I was more like. I think there's this perception that the sole dad will be welcomed with open arms into the mother's group, and and that wasn't your experience necessarily.
No, not really.
All the time.
Not all the time. Sometimes, but not all the time. But you know, it was. I remember I had a couple of other friends who had done a similar role, and I remember I was talking to one friend of mine who spent a year or 18 months with. I think he had 2 kids at the go there at one point. And I said, how did you cope with that? He said, mate, it's like getting castrated, except you still keep your testicles, mate. You wait what it's like. It's just the most demasculising thing. And he sort of joked about it, laughed about it. He said, like it's, you know, it's really kind of a bizarre experience. But like the experience for me internally was great, but there definitely was a perception that, well, why aren't you at work? Yes. You know, why you're the provider, and it's not just coming from, strangers. It's coming from people close to you as well. Like that definitely, they may not say it, but you know they're thinking it.
Of course, I don't really think that has changed much. I know that we talk about that, Ched, but overwhelmingly, I think there is still obviously the mother is in that full-time mothering role. So yes, I still think that there's a long way to go on that.
Definitely.
How did that change the way you perceived yourself in terms of the male identity? Is that something that
I really struggled with that.
Yeah.
I really struggled with that. I always thought that I would be, the provider, the breadwinner, the guy that would, help with all of that. That's what I would do. And then so I struggled with it. So a lot of that was just internally my issue as well. That sense of identity, because it was just such a shock to the system. And so I'm struggling with mental health as well as this massive change in what role I was doing. It was a big struggle with my identity.
So can you tell me a bit about how you became aware of how you were feeling and how you recognised that you were in depression, I guess? Because a lot of, particularly men, are detached so much from their feelings, they don't actually recognise that they're unhappy. So were there triggers or particular feelings that came up for you, like, oh, there is definitely something not right and this is something that I need to...
Well, they call it the black dog for a reason. And, I never really understood what that term meant until, now. And basically what happens is it just creeps up on you. You don't really have... Like, there was a couple of circumstances in my life that, sure, were a big shock and a big change and a very stressful work breakdown. I went through a relationship breakdown before that, which was stressful, not long before that. And so, you think you're going to be okay. And then you think that if you just get a couple of wins, you'll be all right. But then when you don't get the wins and you get a couple more losses, then those losses aren't just little anymore. They just are exacerbated to adding to this big thing. So then when you apply for a job and you don't get it, then that becomes a much bigger deal than if you were working and you applied for a job and you didn't get the job. It's like, oh, well, geez, I really wish I'd have got that. But you go off and you do your thing and you don't really worry about it. But when you're desperate, and then you're applying for things and you're going in for an interview and you think, okay, this is it. Sorry, no. Then it becomes harder and harder. The tension at home builds up and builds up and builds up. It has a massive impact on your relationship. So then every little thing becomes a big thing. Yeah. And then your ability to be able to deal with the little things gets less and less until you're at the stage where no matter what goes wrong, it's a catastrophe.
Yeah.
And then you're in a position where you need real help. And while I was going to counselling, the first couple of times I went to counselling, they give you a form to fill out and they say, rate what you're feeling from 1 to 10 and all this sort of stuff. And there was a question on there that said, suicidal thoughts, right? So how many suicidal thoughts did you have this week? And you write down a number. And when I first went into counselling, no one told me what that meant, right? So I'd put down, did I think I was going to kill myself this week? Probably not, so I put 0.
Yeah.
And then the next time I went in, I thought, there was a time this week where I thought I might do it. So I put down 1 time. And then that was in the early days of counselling. When things were really bad, when I was close to hospitalisation, I went and had a proper psychiatric assessment, and the guy was really great. And he went through the questionnaire and he said, okay, so you rate to this between 1 to 10 and blah, blah, blah. And instead of just giving me the form, he went through the form and he filled it out. And then he said, so suicidal thoughts. How many suicidal thoughts have you had this week? And I said, I didn't really think I'd try and kill myself this week. And he goes, oh, no, that's not what that means. And I said, oh, what do you mean? What does it mean? And he said, oh, it just means how often you think about it. And I said, oh, God. And he said, well, do you think about it daily? I said, oh, yeah. Well, is it every day? Yeah, I'd definitely every day. He said, well, how many times a day? I said, I don't know. And I said, I think about it all the time. He said, we really got to get some work done.
Yeah, and that's
And then he spoke to my wife and said, your husband's really ill.
Yeah.
And like I don't know if I had filled out that form earlier, maybe there would be more. But it was on my mind all the time. And so that he would say, like, you might think about the impact that it have on your family. You might think, oh, what am I going to do with the money? What am I going to do with who am I going to give my things to? How would I do it? What are my parents going to say? Who's going to write something for my eulogy? Well, that stuff would consume my mind all day, every day. There would be hardly a moment that went by at that period that I wasn't thinking about it. But so beforehand, I don't know whether I was guarding myself or guarding other people or whatever, but it probably could have been picked up a bit earlier.
So what happened then in that situation where that psychiatrist actually took notice and asked you more questions? Because that's what it is about a lot of the time, right? Just asking more questions.
Yeah, well, it's a really strange thing because the first thing they do is they go straight to medication.
Yeah.
Now, I never wanted to go down that track because, and maybe I should have, and I'm not saying it's the right or wrong thing. I don't want to give advice. I'm just saying what I did. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get myself better, and maybe I should have. Maybe I would have got better quicker. I don't know. But I didn't. I didn't do that. I refused it.
What did you do?
Probably a lot of the same. So when I didn't medicate. I didn't take prescription medication, but I probably medicated myself quite a lot.
Yep.
And yeah, that became a way for me to escape and feel better. And I always felt better for a little while, and then the next day you feel like shit. And so, yeah, it was a long time before I started getting, counselling again and really talking things out. So at that time
you didn't take after that initial assessment, you didn't go for counselling. That took a while to come to that place where you got
again,
yeah.
I just refused to. I don't want to let it win, but at the same time, it was winning.
Yeah,
it was beating me.
So, what was the resistance to having talking therapy or talking to someone, even after that?
I don't know. I found counselling after a while for me. I found it counterintuitive because I just felt like every time I go into counselling, I came out feeling worse. So I just didn't want to feel worse. So I just stopped going.
Yeah.
And then I kept going down lower and lower and lower. And my wife kept saying to me, I don't know what we're going to do. What are we going to do? We've got to do something. We've got to do something. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And the big turning point for me was, well, not that, I kind of had some time on my hands. I did a bit of work around the house, and then I got I just found a handyman guy to come around and fix up part of my deck. And he said to me, "Oh, who does all your gardens?" And I said, "Oh, I do. I love working in the garden." And he said, "Oh, mate, I'm a handyman in this area. I don't know how many people say to me, I want someone to come around and do my gardens." And I got to the stage where my little girl was now in daycare a couple of days a week, so I needed to do something. And I really didn't feel as though I could go back into any kind of stressful environment.
Like an office or training
I really didn't really want to be around people, which is totally the opposite of me. So I just kind of wanted to be mainly in solitude or just around close friends.
Yeah.
And so he said, "Oh, look, you could probably just put a sign up in the local shops and do some garden work." And I said, "Yeah, okay, I might think about that." And I'd actually toyed with the idea of it a little bit beforehand. I thought, well, that might just get me out of the house, get me just doing something. So I did that. I went and put a little sign up at the shops and mowing and gardening. But the next day I had 3 people ring up. And so I thought, oh, shit. I borrowed my dad's trailer, just had the household car, and went out and started mowing lawns and gardening. And at first I thought, this is just shit. This is really beneath me. And, like I was just saying to you before, I got a wardrobe full of suits and ties and shirts and nice shoes, and they're all just sitting there, and I'm just wearing crusty old shorts and a t-shirt and steel cap boots and out in the sweat and mowing old ladies' yards for $30. And then, but it just got me doing something. And I just kept going each day. Well, I just keep going, I just keep going, I just keep going. And then I tell you what, it was tough because I started in the worst drought that we've had in eons. And that winter period, like I was just driving around to dead grass. And so then I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I failed again, and the catastrophe starts.
Yeah.
And I don't know what kept me going, whether it was just, pressure from, all angles just to try and do something. But there was a lot of pressure for me to go get another job and just get out there and just get back to what you're doing. But I knew that I couldn't do that.
You could not go back.
Absolutely, no way. And so I just kept thinking, well, I'll just keep trying, I just keep trying, and then things just got better. I started going from just filling up 2 days. It took a while to fill up 2 days. Then so okay, let's try for 3 days. And I remember coming home saying, I made $400 this week. I was like, oh, okay, great. Let's see if we can get some more. And then, but that was a big milestone for me in all honesty. And then, then all of a sudden you're trying to build up to, an extra day. And then eventually I started just getting good 3 solid days. And then I went through a pretty good summer the next year and started to really build up a little client base. And I'm thinking, this could be a good little business, I'm good with people. And I had a natural way of getting on a job. If I was quote a job, I always got it, because, I was personable and helpful and, trying to do it. And then, so eventually now it's my full-time job. Like when I say it's my full-time job, it's my full-time, what I make make money from. And, it's a great little business. And it was really only probably 8 or 9 months ago that I was coming into my 3rd winter and I had enough work to not be sort of full-time as such, but like really good, solid 4 days a week and, making some like a decent little wage. And I was looking forward to the summer and I was just thinking to myself, dude, this is a pretty good job. Like it's 25 degrees, it's not a cloud in the sky. Every day is like this. Every morning I wake up, have a coffee, go and prune someone's rose garden.
Yeah.
And
I think as friends we've spoken about, like I remember when I was trying to get my business running, I went and worked for my brother and outside in the sun, and he's a builder and I was doing, carpet laying and nailing things and I just love the experience of being outside, outdoors, out
absolutely.
In an office, and I love gardens and plants too. But just can you talk about how that impacts how that helps with mental health?
Well, first thing it does is it impacts physically.
Physically, yeah.
And I think this is a really big thing because then, so going through that winter period and thinking, there are worse jobs. This is a good job. Like I'm my own boss. I was at the stage where I really wasn't knocking back any jobs, but I could have if I wanted to. But I sort of pretty much took on everything that I had the opportunity to do. Some jobs are not great, but that's the same as any job. But most jobs were really fun, really enjoyable, and the physical aspect of it then starts to really come in, where you're coming home from work and you're physically exhausted,
Yeah.
but mentally, you're mentally really. Like you've had a good day.
Yeah.
You've been in the sun. It's green grass. It's green trees. You're learning about plants. You're learning about soil. You're learning about pests. You're meeting some really great people. I've got really good customers, right? And then some of the most enjoyable people that I work with are elderly. I seem to really connect well with my elderly customers, and then they start to really rely on you, and they start to ring you up, and then you start to talk to their family. And go, everyone knows who Sean the gardener is because and then it's like and then I've had other family members of elderly customers say, look, Sean, I can't tell you how important it is for you to be here every fortnight for Mum. Or you're here every week and Mum knows that you're going to be here and she always says, Sean always helps me move stuff around the house or bring in some shopping or take stuff out of the car or whatever. And then I actually started to think to myself, this is really important what I'm doing. then the attitude started to change. So hang on a second, like this is important. What I'm doing is important. These people need me to be here. They rely on me to be here every fortnight. And in a lot of cases, I'm one of their only visitors.
Yeah. So that's a purpose, right?
It's total purpose. And sometimes I think, okay, well, I'm going to charge $50 to do that yard. Hopefully I can be in and out in an hour and a half. But 2 hours later, I'm sitting down with a cup of tea and a scone and having a chat about whatever it is. And, you know, that the joy on their face of having someone there to visit and just talking and communicating and getting that back, you know, all of a sudden it's, well, I'm back networking, but it's in a totally different sphere. Yeah. And then I'm getting phone calls from someone like, oh, well, you look after Marge's house in the Gap, and she said, you know, you never fail to be there every fortnight. Can you come around and have a look at my back courtyard and da-da-da? Then life became purposeful. I fully changed my attitude to it.
Yeah. And
then so I came into this summer in a really good position because, you know, so seasonally it rained quite a lot in the winter, and then we had a good wet spring, and I just knew that this summer this is going to boom. And I tell you what, I've been so busy that I'm now turning away jobs and turning away work, and, you know, coming home at night now, instead of thinking about all of these things that you ruminate on and you go over and over in your mind how bad things are and how bad things have been and how unlucky I've been and I wish this didn't happen, and if that had happened I wouldn't feel like this, to just coming home, making dinner, having a cold beer and a glass of wine with dinner, and then just looking forward to going to bed and sleeping like a rock.
Yeah, that's, you know, that would be, that sounds like actually a dream, because
I
don't sleep very well. But...
And then I remember just looking at myself in the mirror at the lead up of the end of last year and looked at myself hard for ages. And it was a really bizarre experience because I don't know if you've ever really properly looked at yourself, but it's a very, very unbelievable thing to do. Mm. And I just said to myself in the mirror, I'm going to beat depression. I'm going to beat it.
Yeah.
And like I say, have I beaten it? No. It's there. But I'm going to give it a bloody good shot.
Sounds like your gardening business was your therapy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was really interesting to talk to a guest on one of our other episodes who was a Qantas pilot and lost a job through COVID, and that positive attitude that she took to some of the jobs that she didn't want to do, that's what I've done.
Yes.
And so it has been a turning point. And then so once I started to feel good about that, then I started to look at other ways that I could turn things around. And that's when I started to look into meditation and, the properly starting to research out the balance of nature and mental health and physical activity and mental health. And, you know, I don't have a gym membership now. There's no way I need a gym membership. I'll probably walk 20 Ks a day without trying. And that's pushing machinery, you know. And so you're coming home, you don't have to
go to the gym.
Yeah, you don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to worry about that aspect of it. You're constantly exercising all day. You're constantly...
And you got back into your music. So,
absolutely.
I mean,
that's another big thing.
Part of the...
And that was one of the things that I lost, through the depression. I mean, I played in a lot of bands, which I still play a lot of music, but I also was heavily involved in music management and, music publicity. And it got to the stage where, you know, I was having some good success with an artist that I managed, Sabrina Laurie. She put out an amazing record called Hush the Mountain, which I was absolutely proud to be involved in. And then when that album came out, you know, it was really, really critically acclaimed, but then it sort of struggled to get the momentum that I think it really deserved. And for me, even though it was a real success and something that anyone would say, that is an incredible record, it got a 4.5-star rating on Rolling Stone and all that sort of stuff, you think 10 years ago, I would have flown off that and driven hard. But as soon as that little bit of success petered off, I thought, well, here we go again, more failure. I can't have more failure. I can't have it. And so I kind of let it go in a way. And then, again, so there was another piece of my identity gone. A big part of what I did was I was a music manager, an artist manager. And then all of a sudden I don't have that. And that was a real struggle. And then, Sabrina reached out to me, probably 8 or 9 months ago to start to do some work again, because we just had a good break actually from each other. That was great. It was a lot hard 8 years before that. And then I've come back into it now with absolute vigor because I feel good. But at the same time, I'm not just this overly optimistic guy now. Like, I'm a bit more leveled out. I know that there's going to be challenges, and I can start to think about that. Whereas beforehand, I just thought that everything I touched was going to turn to gold.
Black and white.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's been very healing for me as well. Music has been a massive part of my life for since I was in my early teens. I still play a lot of music. The guys that I play in bands with have been some of the most supportive people, the best listeners, as well as my close friends that I grew up with in my neighbourhood have been really, really great. But, getting back into that has given me a sense of purpose. And then what that has done then is then all of a sudden you start to look at how your life links up and how things can be really positive. So you think, well, I couldn't really throw myself back into music management with the vigour that I wanted if I was working in some corporate job. Mm. But doing what I'm doing with a gardening business, I can take a call anytime. I can stop and send an email. I can schedule my day if I need to make a meeting. I can listen to music all day. So if I want to listen to new music, or if I want to be listening to ideas, or if I want to be listening to demos that my artist is sending me, if I want to be just I listen to music all day, or I can listen to a podcast on music, but just be thinking about that all the time while I'm going about my work. And then so all of a sudden, then the light bulb clicks. Things can be really great if you just look at things from a different approach.
And I think that's a good way to finish up. I really want to thank you for being so open and honest today.
Thanks,
you ripped your
Mel.
heart out.
Thank you.
I would like to finish with, so what do you value most now? Going through these significant life changes, what would you say are your core values now?
I would say close friends and family are the most important thing to me. I would say that what I value now is not what people do for a work or their occupation, or what it looks like from the outside. What is really important is how people are, and that's when I look at how lucky I am to have some of the people around that I have. Is that some of them are real corporate high flyers and some of them aren't, but it doesn't matter. The people that I love having around are people that are genuine, people that are honest, people that are willing to listen, and people that won't judge. And they're the things that I really value. And I think being healthy is much better than being rich.
Yep. Thank you so much, Sean, for today.
Thanks, Mel.
And we've finished up another episode of The Balanced Brain. And we've got the hardest parts out of both of our stories.
Yes.
And that's created a platform for people to share. And we've had our first interview. So please, we hope you join us for our other episodes coming up, and hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. Bye.